Hi there, this is Dave at Two Stroke Performance. I'm doing a video today in the dyno room. I've got the new 2020 250 TPI bike on the dyno. I actually still haven't had a chance to ride it yet because I've been a bit too busy. And then a couple of days when I was going to ride, it was wet and raining and didn't really feel like going out in the mud with a brand new bike. So today or this afternoon I've put this bike on the dyno. I'm about to do a little bit more testing with it. It's totally stock. I'm basically running it in on the dyno before I take it out riding now tomorrow. So I just wanted to do some baseline runs and get a feel for what sort of power it's making. I've already accessed the stock ECU and had a look at the maps, the fuel and the ignition maps, so I'm pretty confident as to the sort of power that it's going to make and what the delivery is going to look like, but obviously I just want to verify that before I actually ride the bike. So yeah, in this video I will show you just some of the, I won't show you all the dyno tuning stuff because it goes for quite a long time, and there's a number of different things that I do, but I'll just show you a snippet of some of the runs at different throttle positions, and then I'll once I've got some results, I'll show you some of the dyno curves. Well, it's fair to say that I've absolutely hammered this thing on the dyno. I've been doing runs now for about 40 or 45 minutes. A mixture of wide open throttle runs and part throttle runs where I allow the engine to rev all the way out, and then a whole lot of runs at a constant throttle. At a constant RPM point, but with varying throttle, so the dyno won't allow the bike to rev, beyond a certain RPM point. Doing all that just gives me a good feel for how the bike runs, and I can get a whole lot of data from all those various runs. So these are some of the results. So these are all the various curves for this particular bike in stock form. So down here, that's a 1/8 throttle run. You see it doesn't really do a huge amount, and then it peters out by about 5,500 and won't rev any further. The next one here is quarter throttle. This is definitely better than the previous year model. It's certainly smoother and it keeps revving. After about 8, I stopped it at about 8,500, but it would keep going a little bit beyond there. But you know, it's reasonable. The pink line here is half throttle, which was quite good. Again, I stopped it at 8.5. I probably should have continued, but I just had the dyno set to stop at that point. Fairly nice straight line delivery. The green line is 3/4 throttle, and then the red line is full throttle. So you'll see there's not a huge difference on this bike between half throttle and full throttle, but it's got, you know, a little bit extra in it. Peak power at wide open throttle is about 48.5 to 49. The wavy line here is just due to an unbalanced rear tyre. I just need to pull that old tyre off and fit a different one and balance it properly. So that does have a small impact on the outright horsepower readings, but for the purposes of this testing, it's not that important. One thing that I did notice, this year model revs out further than previous. It's peaking at about 9,000 RPM. The previous one from memory peaked a little bit earlier and then signed off just a fraction earlier. I can kind of see why in the ignition curves and the fuel curves. Fuel mixtures up top are what I think are a little bit on the lean side, and that puts a lot more heat into the pipe, which allows the engine to rev out further. But overall, it's definitely an improvement on the previous year model. Now I'll just bring up some other curves. What can I show you here? So this is the previous year model at quarter throttle, this grey line here that I've added. So you'll see it, the two sort of chop and change, but the new model definitely has more power, between about 5,000 and 6,000 RPM. Then I'll bring up half throttle for the previous year model. So now I'll just remove some lines. I'll get rid of the top two for a minute. So now we're looking at the pink line here and the purple line, and again it's similar to the quarter throttle setting. So at half throttle, the new bike makes noticeably more power, from sort of 4.5 or 5 through to 6.5, and a little bit more up top as well. It definitely revs out more cleanly than the previous one. So that's a nice nice improvement. Then I'll just look at maybe full throttle, the new bike versus the 19 model. Which one here? Yeah, there we go. That's a good example. And again, I'll just remove some of these other curves. Okay, so full throttle, we're looking at the red line, which is the 2020 model, nice and linear delivery, and the light blue line, which is the 2019 model. So again, 2020 model has a bit more punch, between about 5,000 and 6,000 RPM, has noticeably less, from 6 to 8.5, and then it revs out a bit further around 9,000. Now, one of the main reasons for this extra power here on the previous model is the different power valve setting. Certainly on this bike, and from what I've heard, a lot of other bikes are coming from the factory with the power valve preload set a decent way in, or certainly further in than on some previous year models. So I think there's going to be some gains to head just by reducing that preload a little bit. I think this red line will pick up through there, and certainly there might be an opportunity to change the power valve spring as well. So that's just an interesting thing with the 19 model making much more power at sort of 6.5 through to 8. Now, from memory, this bike as well, the 19 model was really lean through here. So this wasn't necessarily a great tune. But still, when we then modified that 19 model, we were able to get a lot more power again. So the same will be true on the 2020 model. Now I'll just remove some of these and show you some comparisons to some of the modified maps. So what have we got here? So this one I'm bringing up. So that is the 2019 model that we had in here that we modified, and this orange line is at 3/4 throttle. So you see the modified 19 makes roughly the same as the 20 model, up to about, this is at wide open throttle, up to about 5,500, and then it makes an absolute truckload more up to about 8.5. But then the 20 model revs out a lot further. So one thing I'm going to focus on this time around with the 2020 model is just extending this over rev. There's a number of ways. It's fairly straightforward to do that, just through ignition and fueling. So I'll definitely aim to sort of match some of these gains that the stock 2020 model has in over-rev. I'll definitely be aiming to extend this here. As I said, this orange line is a 3/4 throttle run. On the modified 19 model, wide open throttle, it wasn't a huge difference, but the whole curve was just a little bit higher up, and it made around 50 at the rear wheel. The 2020 model was peaking before what I said, about 48.5 to 49. What else can I show you? I'll get rid of that run, and maybe I'll show you something around about a 1/4 throttle. What have I got here? Oh yeah, there we go. Let's remove this other grey line. Okay, so now looking down here at a 1/4 throttle, so this is the stock 2020 model, the blue line, and then this grey line is the modified 19 model. I'll just double check that. I just want to make sure I'm showing you the correct thing. Yeah, so that grey line here is the modified 2019 model at 1/4 throttle. Nice and linear delivery, makes a lot more power all the way through than the 2020 model. So again, I'm sort of expecting that when I fit one of our heads to this bike and then adjust the fuel and ignition maps, we're going to be able to make some reasonable improvements. There's no question this 2020 model is an improvement over the 2019. It's certainly smoother on the dyno. A lot of the spluttering has disappeared. But yeah, it's going to be pretty easy to get more power out of it, especially at part throttle. And I'll certainly try and match this, this improved over rev that the 2020 model has. There's probably one more thing that I wanted to show you, and that is a stock. Here we go. This green curve that I've just added here. This is a stock 2019 300 TPI. So if you have a look there, with the modified 250, we were able to match, or in fact make more power than a stock 300. So it just shows you the sort of gains that can be had. Obviously the modified 300 made more again, but for those people trying to, I guess, understand how this bike would feel to ride, when we modify a 250, we can make it ride very similar to at least a stock 300, if not better, at part throttle and low to mid revs. So that's quite an important thing to get your head around. I get a lot of feedback from customers who have done these mods, and most of the time they say to me, I just can't believe just how much extra power there is at part throttle. And so that's a good way to think about it. When we modify a 250, we can get it to act at least the same as a stock 300, if not better, at low to mid throttle. So that's probably about it for the moment. I think I've covered a fair bit of stuff. It's a fairly long video. So yeah, fairly impressed with this 2020 model so far. For a stock bike, obviously, the manufacturers aren't in the business of building highly tuned bikes. They're in the business of building, like, I guess, moderately tuned bikes that suit the broadest number of riders. But there's no question, for people that are looking for a bit more punch out of these bikes, we're definitely going to be able to do that for you by modifying the stock ECU and fitting one of our heads. And pretty confident again that it's going to be one of the best value for money setups on the market for these TPIs. So I will take this bike out tomorrow morning and do some riding, and then it'll be, I'll just get a feel for it as a stock bike, and then it will be back on the dyno early next week with a head fitted, and I'll tune the ECU, and certainly by the end of next week I'll have the tune for this nailed down, and then we'll start doing the exact same process on the 300. So thanks for watching, and keep your eyes out for the next video when we actually get into some mods on this bike.